Good morning. I am Professor Srilata from Sai Vidya Institute of Technology. I'm handling the subject computer organization. In today's class, we'll see about handling multiple interrupts from multiple devices. So that is the topic which is covered for this video. Now, this the particular structure which you see for us for the multiple priority. Okay, that is, if the devices there is interrupts from different devices of multiple priority, how is the interrupt request sent and how is the acknowledgement sent? So here you can see a new word, that is new term, interrupt acknowledgement. Interrupt acknowledgement is the acknowledgement sent to the device by the processor. It says that the interrupt is accepted. And after the acknowledgement is received by the device, the transfer of data takes place between the processor and input-output device. Okay, so this is the priority structure. We see it as a priority structure because depending on the priority of the device, the devices are arranged. Means each device is given the interrupt request line and interrupt acknowledgement line. And depending on the priority, by using the priority arbitration circuit selects the device with higher priority and acknowledgement is sent to only that device. Okay. Now suppose if the two devices which I consider easy to consider is the keyboard, from where you are entering the data character by character, and hard disk, okay, where number of number of characters can be retrieved at the same time. So which is faster? The hard disk is faster, because once a sector is selected, the whole sector of data can be transferred without any mechanical motion. Fine. So number of data which is received from the hard disk is faster access of data when compared to keyboard. Okay. So hard disk is given the higher priority. Now suppose this is the hard disk and this is the keyboard. Okay, so if request is sent from hard disk, from the keyboard and the hard disk, so priority arbitration circuit, whether it is nesting or whether it is a request at the same time, the priority arbitration circuit checks which device has a higher priority and acknowledgement is sent to that device. Okay, hard disk gets the acknowledgement and hence the transfer of data takes place between the hard disk and the IO, that is the processor. Okay, so this is the priority structure, and yes, each device has a separate input request and input acknowledgement request as per this priority structure. This is an architecture which can be implemented for the connection of devices and the processor. Fine. Each device has an input request line and input acknowledgement line. Each input request has a different priority level, as I told. Each device has a different priority. Okay. Arbitration circuit is there to check which device has a higher priority. Okay, depending on the priority, the device is selected and acknowledgement is sent. Okay, so what happens if the requests are simultaneously, if the requests come simultaneously? Yes, if the request comes simultaneously, the device which has a higher priority, that device is given for the that particular service is accepted. That particular interrupt request is accepted first. Suppose there are two or more devices which has the same priority. Okay, two or more devices which has the same priority. In such case, the technique used is the polling and daisy chain. So what happens in polling mechanism? The processor, as usual, is connected to the devices, IO devices. Processor is connected to the IO devices. Okay. The processor checks which device has sent the interrupt request. Okay. Which device has sent the interrupt request? Suppose the device 1 and device 3 has sent the interrupt request simultaneously. Has sent the interrupt request simultaneously. Okay, now processor is checking from this particular device. So wherever the processor has stopped earlier, from there it checks polling, it checks the devices, whether the status register, whether the interrupt request in status register is set to 1. Okay, so status register, there is keyboard interrupt request, display interrupt request. If the interrupt request, keyboard interrupt request or display interrupt request is set to 1, then that device has sent an interrupt. Now, this is the device which has sent the interrupt. I1 is sent and I3 is sent interrupt. Okay, so that is the interrupt numbers. Fine. This particular device D2 has not sent the interrupt. Status bit will be set to 0. Okay, so processor checks. Suppose it starts checking from device 2. It checks that the status bit is not set to 1. Okay, it is set to 0. So this has not sent the interrupt. Next, it checks the next device. Yes, here the status flag is set to 1. That means interrupt is sent by I3. That is, interrupt I3 is sent by the D3 device. Okay, an acknowledgement is sent from the processor to the D3 device to continue the transfer of data. Okay, acceptance of the signal, that is acknowledgement, is sent from the processor to the device D3. Fine. Now this and the transfer of this data starts. So this is the polling mechanism. The processor polls and checks the status register of each and every IO device. When the status bit is set to 1, then such a device which the processor checks first, whose interrupt request is set to 1, such a device is given the priority, is given the access of the processor. Okay, so that is polling mechanism. The next mechanism which deals with the simultaneous request, simultaneous interrupt request, is daisy chain mechanism. Here in daisy chain, an interrupt acknowledgement. So two devices has sent, again suppose two devices has sent an interrupt request. In daisy chain, the acknowledgement is sent, okay, to the first device, always to the first device. So when acknowledgement is sent to the first device has sent the interrupt request, correct? So status flags request is set to 1. So what it does not process or send the acknowledgement to the next device. The acknowledgement is stopped and the transfer of data takes place between the processor and the device 1. Okay, suppose device 1 has not sent the interrupt request. Interrupt request is sent by device N and device 2. Okay, they have sent the interrupt request. I2 is the interrupt and N is the interrupt sent by those devices. Interrupt acknowledgement is received by device 1. It has not sent the interrupt request, so it forwards the interrupt acknowledgement to the next device. Okay, next device has sent the interrupt request. So this device does not process, does not forward the acknowledgement. It receives the acknowledgement and the transfer of data takes place between this device and the processor. Okay, this is daisy chain mechanism where all devices are connected in a single line. Okay, there is a single interrupt request line and single interrupt acknowledgement line. Fine. The acknowledgement line is connected, means from one device to the other device. The device which is nearer to the processor, which is electrically nearer to the processor, such a device is given the priority. Okay, because the processor is sending the acknowledgement to the first device which is connected. Okay, so electrically closest device will be having the higher priority. Otherwise, the signals, the acknowledgement passes to the next devices. Okay, that is daisy chain mechanism. A combination of the priority structure and daisy chain mechanism exist. That is, this is the number of devices which has the same priority, three, suppose priority three, which are connected in a daisy chain fashion, and these are the devices which has the same priority, suppose priority 1, okay, which are connected in a daisy chain fashion. So one of the device will be selected from this particular line and sent to the processor. There is a processor priority arbitration circuit which selects which device has the higher priority, and that particular device will be getting the acknowledgement, final acknowledgement. Okay, so that is the how the interrupt is handled here. As I told, the devices are grouped depending on the priority of the devices. Okay, and there is both daisy chain and priority structure. Okay, so that is about the interrupts. Next, in the next video we will see about the exceptions.